Welcome to another episode of Al Shak Al Satlana, Our Middle East. As we record this program, in just several hours, the Israeli War Cabinet and the full government will be voting on what appears to be a Trump-mediated deal. But is this deal total victory, or is it a momentary triumph? Join us. Khaled Abu Tuameh, my longtime friend and colleague, co-host of Our Middle East. There are more questions than answers in what's called the first stage of a very long war between Israel and the Iran-backed Hamas. Khaled, it seems to me that we're looking at a momentary triumph far more than total victory at this stage, even though Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Ron Dermer deserve a lot of credit for their determination, and especially for Dermer's close relationship with President Trump and his team in Washington. But when we look at this deal, it appears that Hamas can claim a real victory. Israel can claim a respite. Hostages may be coming back, maybe not all of them coming back, and the hyper celebrations in Israel appear at the moment to be premature.
If this deal goes through, the deal that was announced early this morning by President Trump, Hamas, and Israel, then we will see the implementation of the first phase of the deal. Let's not forget, the Trump plan is a 20-point plan. And the first phase of this plan calls for the release of all the hostages, the Israeli hostages. We're talking about 48, 20 alive, 28 bodies. If this goes through, this is, of course, something, that should be lauded. It's a very positive step. It is a victory, yes, if Israel manages to get all the hostages back, although I'm a bit skeptical about the bodies because we are hearing reports in the Palestinian media and other Arab media that Hamas probably does not know where all the bodies are and all these things that we are hearing. But if this goes through, this is something that we should all welcome. I mean, who doesn't want to see the hostages return home reunited with their families? So all those who are celebrating have good reason to celebrate because we are celebrating the imminent release of the hostages. Seeing them come back to their families is a victory, especially after 2 years. Now, the question is, what is going to happen with phase 2 and 3 and other phases of the, or other clauses of the Trump plan? And what am I talking about? I'm talking about disarming Hamas, removing Hamas from power, and the extent of the Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, and the post-war management or administration of the Gaza Strip. These are all issues that need to be negotiated. Now, my concern is that after the hostages are released, people will just forget. They will say, okay, the war is over. Hamas released the hostages. Let's stop the fighting and let's go back to square one. Hamas is still there. And, it will be only a matter of time before Hamas rearms, regroups, and launches another October 7 attack. So we need to wait and see what is going to happen with the rest of this deal. There's no doubt that these are very important times, but we need to be very careful. I don't like to hear the talk about everlasting peace, enduring peace, and a historic peace. Let's not raise expectations. This is not a peace deal. This is a deal between Israel or the US and other countries and a terrorist organization. If you ask me, I would have preferred to see the negotiations with Hamas only over the release of the hostages. Why are we negotiating with Hamas over the future of Gaza, over weapons in Gaza. Who is Hamas to determine, the presence of Israeli forces here or there? And to, if we are talking to them about these issues, that means we are giving them legitimacy. We are recognizing the fact that they are a de facto government in Gaza. Someone comes to rob a bank and you surround the bank, and that someone is holding hostages. Your number one priority should be to release the hostages, but then you don't sit and negotiate with the robber or the criminals about, where they are going to live, or which prison they will go to, or whether they will hand their weapons or not. Negotiations with a terrorist organization is something very dangerous. It creates a precedent, and that worries me.
Now you're talking like a real Middle Easterner, as you always talk about, and that's why Al Shakal Al Satlana, our Middle East, creates perspective from a Middle Eastern standpoint on everything that's taking place in the Middle East. And this is really one of the ultimate examples of a disconnect between the hyper celebration and optimism, which of course is welcome by Israel and the West. And on the other hand, the Middle East, when you say caution is advised, when you say be suspect, that's a Middle Eastern approach. It's very important for us to understand, and for our dear audience to understand the vast differences in approaches between the West and the Arab East on this issue. If you look at this from an Israeli point of view, it seems that it was clear to Dermer, Minister Ron Dermer, who successfully negotiated a number of points on Lebanon and negotiated points on Syria. His eyes are wide open that this particular deal is not a peace deal, as you say. It's a hostage exchange for some of the worst terrorists that have been imprisoned. 67 life terms given to one terrorist, Abdullah Barghouti, another Barghouti, Marwan Barghouti, 6 life sentences for murdering Israeli innocent women, children, and men. And that, from an Israeli point of view, is a momentary triumph because it actually robs Hamas of its major negotiating leverage. That is a reason for optimism, if in fact that happens. And we have to ask ourselves and answer why that happened, because it's all about interests. And Qatar and Turkey and Egypt have major economic interests with the Trump administration and the United States. Turkey wants F-35 jets from the United States,
And
Egypt
F-16s also.
and F-16s, and Egypt wants debt relief from the United States.
And it wants to prevent Palestinians from moving to Sinai or into Egypt.
Absolutely. In that sense, Khalid, this is really not the Trump Riviera plan was panned and shelved. And now we have what I call the Arab Gulf plan, because this plan reflects, with American agreement, what the Egyptians proposed several months ago, a number of months ago, when Trump first suggested the Riviera plan, which was absolutely panned by everyone in the Sunni Arab establishment. Um, and so here, what we have from an Israeli point of view is a certain advantage because it drafts the United States and coalesces actually the Arab world together with the United States to say, if in stage two, the Hamas rejects the 5 conditions that Prime Minister Netanyahu laid out since the beginning of the war, which only come in stage 2 and perhaps stage 3, then Israel has all the right in the world and the backing to completely destroy the Hamas in an all-out offensive, which is going to be very high risk, very dangerous for Israel. But at this particular moment, with the exchange, with this proposed exchange, which is a dangerous and high risk exchange, at least Israel, if it goes through in the coming 72 hours, first the 20 living hostages, then the whatever bodies Israel is able to recover, and we're not sure that they will recover all of them. In fact, I would put my money on that Hamas will hold some of those bodies and then claim victory already in stage 1.
Well, we have already seen some Hamas people and Hamas supporters inside Gaza and outside Gaza celebrating, celebrating what they call victory. Why do they see it as victory? And this is very important. I mean, we need to look how we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the other side, and we need to see how others look at it.
Well said.
Perception is very important. There are many people who see this as a victory. Why? They say, look, Netanyahu was talking about total victory, removing Hamas from power, destroying Hamas, disarming Hamas, rescuing the hostages through by force. He did not get that. Trump threatened us with hell. Trump threatened to turn Gaza into a Riviera and relocate the people of Gaza. That did not happen. Israel tried for 2 years to, destroy Hamas. That did not happen. This is a victory in their view because at the end of the day, Israel is isolated in the international community. Israel, in their eyes, has become a pariah state. The international community is mobilized against Israel. Even Hamas said that the international recognitions are one of the fruits of October 7. You know, Westerners would say, okay, but what about the death and destruction of Gaza? That's the last thing that Hamas cares about. In their eyes, and I think Khalid Mash'al said it, or Musa Abu Marzouk, I can't remember. He said the people who are dying in Gaza are tactical sacrifices in the jihad against Israel. So we need to also look at how the other side sees it. And when the other side sees that this is a victory in their eyes, this will embolden the jihadis and the terrorist organizations. That's why it's very important to follow up and insist on the implementation of phase 2 and 3, which is the total eradication of Hamas. Hamas has no right to exist, not as a military force, not as a political party. Hamas must vanish from the Palestinian scene or arena. Otherwise, we haven't achieved anything. We have gone back to October 6th. Now, I'm afraid that after the hostages are released, the pressure on Qatar and Turkey and Egypt will ease because, the Trump administration will even say, okay, look, we got the hostages back. You guys can go and do whatever you want now. You want to talk about reconstruction. You want to talk about the future of administration in Gaza. We don't care anymore. And don't forget that the Netanyahu will also, face less pressure here inside Israel because most of the pressure was coming from the hostages' families. So, what is the future of Gaza after the release of the hostages? What is going to happen? These are open questions. And in the Middle East, if you create a vacuum and if you leave things hanging in the air, this does not bode well.
It doesn't. And in fact, part of stage one is an Israeli agreement to pull back to what they call the yellow line, which means that Israel would still be in charge of some 60% of Gaza. But what is absolutely clear after the October 7th atrocities and the war that Hamas is also prosecuting until today, Israel will not leave the Gaza Strip. It will plant itself in a ring of security completely surrounding Gaza. That's a non starter for Hamas. Hamas has already said, as of this morning, we're prepared to freeze the weapons. That's the language they use, not lay down their weapons, and they're prepared not to use offensive weapons. All these types of expressions and the language are concerning because it absolutely indicates that Hamas has no intention of leaving the Gaza Strip. The humanitarian aid that's part of stage one that gets completely flooded is going to be controlled by Hamas as it has been. Hamas will stay either as if not a complete governing power, they will be a co-producer or a governor through the Palestinian Authority. And this is an important point and something that you and I have talked about for years. It's clear that the Palestinian Authority will allow Hamas to come back through the side door. Some of the Hamas most senior members, like Mahmoud al-Zahar, came from the Fatah, that controls the Palestinian Authority, and others did too. So for Hamas to mask itself as in the Hezbollah model from Lebanon in stepping aside, letting the Palestinian Authority come in. The Hamas will still get money. They'll still have behind the scenes control, and they will come through the side door as we move forward. So my point here is that we have a very long slog in Gaza. Nothing's going to be solved immediately after this first stage, if this first stage gets fully implemented by next week.
Also, let's not forget, Dan, that until last year, the Palestinian Authority or President Mahmoud Abbas, they were still trying to make peace with Hamas. Let me remind you, there was something called the China Declaration or the Beijing Declaration. Fatah, Hamas, and other Palestinian factions met in China under the auspices of the Chinese Communist Party and signed a deal, a, a Palestinian reconciliation deal, a national unity deal, a deal that allows Hamas to rule. This is 10 months after the October 7 attack, which shows that Mahmoud Abbas has not ruled out the possibility of joining forces with Hamas in the day after the war. Uh, and this is something that people are not pointing to. It's true that last month or in September, during his speech at the United Nations General Assembly, President Abbas said that Hamas will have no role in governance. Uh, but the China declaration that I just referred to talks about giving Hamas a role in governance in quote unquote the Palestinian territories, including the West Bank and Gaza, which means that Mahmoud Abbas sees Hamas as a partner not only in Gaza but also in the West Bank. And of course, we all know that this is not the first time that Mahmoud Abbas makes an attempt to, sign an agreement with Hamas. He has signed several agreements since 2005 with Hamas. Some of them were partially implemented, some of them were never implemented. But the fact that he and the Fatah faction, his ruling Fatah faction, are prepared and still believe in unity with Hamas is something that will eventually lead to Hamas entering Gaza through, as you mentioned, the side door or the back door. And this is something that people have to notice, because if that happens, we're back to square one. We are back. What the effort or the number one priority of the international community and the Trump administration now should be to avoid it or prevent a situation or a scenario where we are back to October 6th. If that happens, it's only a matter of time before we find ourselves in another round of fighting with Hamas.
Well, the 20-point plan, as negotiated between the Israelis and the United States government, really brings us back much closer to October 6th than the original Trump Riviera plan, because the five conditions of Netanyahu, which is de-radicalization, demilitarization, Hamas lays down its weapons, Israel maintains overall security of the Gaza Strip, and a non-PA, a non-Palestinian Authority, non-Hamas, a Palestinian-trained technical government. I don't know what all that means. Essentially, what it means to those that read between the lines is that a reformed so-called Palestinian Authority that hasn't happened in the last 33 years since the Oslo Accords were first signed in 1993, that they will come back and rule Gaza. Well, all of those are complete non-starters for Israel. The real point here, beyond the big difficulties with the five conditions of the Netanyahu government for security, is the real war that Hamas is winning. And that's the international war. You mentioned it about 10, 15 minutes ago. And that is absolutely critical. What Hamas has done in 2 years, the Palestinian National and Islamic movement has not succeeded to do in 77 years. And that is not only to put what the UN calls the question of Palestine on so-called on the international agenda, not only to have the Palestinian Authority recognized as Yasser Arafat did beginning in 1988, formally when he unilaterally declared a Palestinian state from Algiers. But in fact, they have succeeded to isolate Israel as a genocidal, apartheid, war criminal that is not worthy of being part of the international community. That is a major cognitive, diplomatic, economic jihad. It's an application of jihad that Ahmed Shkeri actually mentioned first in 1964 and has continued until today.
This
It's a
is
very
yeah.
important issue for us to discuss.
This is exactly what Hamas is saying. I've been following statements by Hamas and by Hamas spokesmen and people affiliated with Hamas over the past few days. And they're saying, look, we have scored a major achievement. If the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, the most powerful man on earth, is spending most of his time mentioning Hamas and talking about Hamas and the Palestinians and Gaza, this in itself is an achievement because they say, look, I mean, we are just a small Palestinian faction, and the United States of America is busy with us, and they're sending all these envoys, and they're making all these efforts, and they keep coming up with all these tweets and all these plans. So, this is good. It shows that Hamas has become a regional power in the international arena, even not only on the in the region, and this is very important. Number two, they're saying, look, October 7 and Hamas managed to bring or to put the Palestine question back to center stage. It managed to bring the Palestinian issue to the attention of the world, and this is very important. And as I mentioned earlier, they mentioned the recognition of a Palestinian state by Canada, France, Australia, and the UK as one of the fruits of the October 7th. So this is all very important, how it's seen from the other side, as I said. But at the end of the day, as you mentioned, the question now is, how will the Arabs follow up? How will the Arabs really come, to Gaza? Will they be part of a new government? These are all issues that we don't know. We don't have answers to right now. Uh, in its response to Trump's plan, uh, you need to read the last paragraph then. The last paragraph says that Hamas sees itself as, being part of this administration. It wants to contribute in a responsible way to it. And it also rejects Trump's idea of forming an international administration. They are insisting that any administration in Gaza has to be a Palestinian administration. Now, regarding the Palestinian Authority is now under pressure to reform, to change. Remember my words. In the end, the Palestinian Authority will go to the international community and will say, well, okay, we've taken some measures, but in order to complete this process of reform, we need to achieve national unity. We need to talk to the other factions. We need to talk to Hamas, to Islamic Jihad, because that is the only way to achieve, reconciliation, unity, and even reforms of the PLO, of the Palestinian Authority. And once again, we will see Hamas entering through the back door or the side door, as you said. So these are all things that we need to pay attention to. Look, I'm very happy. I'm very delighted to see the hostages released. That should be the number one priority. But the celebrations must end the day the hostages are released, and we need to open our eyes and start thinking about where are we moving from there. That's very important.
And in that context of where we're moving from there, Israel need be very mindful of the type of American pressure that can come to bear on Israel, because the Americans, led by President Trump, will claim that they made this happen and they played a major part, no question, in this major one-time hostage release, and therefore it's very likely from their point of view, they'll say, "Hey, it's now money time, folks. It's pay up time," and they can't put that type of pressure on the Arab states because they've already applied massive pressure to get the major accomplishment done, the human accomplishment, which is the exchange of hostages for prisoners, which by itself is a very problematic exchange. It's basically 200 murderers freed from Israeli prison in exchange for every one of the remaining hostages. And right, Israel will be in a very, very difficult position to hold its ground in the second and third stages. And Hamas knows that it will have America on its side in a sense because the Arab states, Qatar and Turkey, are Muslim Brotherhood governments and cultures. And so that's when the real war will begin over what's going to happen in this second and third stage. And I will say it is highly likely that some of those bodies will be um, will not come back under the guise of Hamas saying we really don't know where they are. Let's also bear in mind that there are four terror organizations that are involved. There's Palestinian Islamic Jihad. There are local or there are
Actually, it's more than 4, Dan. I mean, we're talking about the, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian Resistance Committees, the PFLP, DFLP, the Mujahideen, and all these groups operating over there. And that's a very good point you raised. Can Hamas rein in these groups? Who will do it? Will the international body that is going to govern Gaza will it have enough power to do? So these are all issues that we need to know. Who is going to dismantle all these groups that are already saying, no matter what deal is achieved, we will not lay down our arms because these are defensive weapons. These are weapons that are needed, to fight against the occupation. We will lay down our weapons only after the establishment of a Palestinian state and after we've achieved our goals. I hear all these statements from these groups, and we should not underestimate the power of these groups and their influence on the ground.
and the international influence. Hamas, in the same way that the Hamas flotilla, led by Greta Thunberg from Sweden, this was Hamas supplied, Hamas idea, Hamas financed, and they have lots of NGOs in the United Kingdom. They have them in the United States. They have them throughout Europe. Abu Marzuk, by the way, had been imprisoned in the United States. He's one of the senior leaders of Hamas. He was supposed to have been eliminated in the assault on Qatar. That did not succeed. And here, these guys like Khalil al-Hayya, who was supposed to have been eliminated in Qatar, he and Marzouk are negotiators. Not all from Cairo, but Hiya is in Cairo negotiating when he was supposed to have been assassinated in Qatar. That, from a cognitive point of view, perceptual point of view, is a major challenge for Israel because it sends a message to the Arab world that Hamas is still in the driver's seat, and the Arab world is, in a sense, uh, kid. I wouldn't say kidnapped, but they're locked in to having to support Hamas's position.
The question here then is, uh, have the Hamas leaders like Khalil al-Hayya and Ghazi Hamad and all these guys sitting in Doha, have they been given some kind of immunity by Qatar and the Americans in the aftermath of the Israeli attempt to assassinate them? The deal that was signed or the announcement by the United States that it will protect Qatar and I can't even remember the term President Trump used. Relating to Qatar as a non-NATO member or something like that.
Yes.
It's actually a security pact. It's actually a pact or a deal that says the American or the United States of America will, or any attack on Qatar will be seen as an attack on the United States or something like that. Now, if Qatar is hosting the Hamas leaders, that means that Israel or others will not be able to target these Hamas leaders, and which means they will be emboldened and they will feel free to operate and continue planning attacks and or planning how to rebuild themselves, how to rebuild Hamas's military capabilities. These are issues that need to be discussed, but if they've been given immunity, this is something very serious.
It's
That means
very
Hamas is still around,
Hamas
will
is
be
still
around.
around, and it brings us really to the elephant in the room, and that's the Islamic Republic of Iran. As you remember, Khamenei made statements that rejected this stage one plan as a posturing mechanism. They're feeling their oats. They're feeling that Hamas is strong, and that's why the Ayatollah issued an across the board cancellation of this. But it's much more than about this deal. It really is a expression of a type of arrogance that the Islamic Republic leadership and the mullahs are expressing, and this is exactly what Israel and the United States have to be very careful about. And in fact, I am sure that they are considering an additional action against the Islamic Republic. That could be the way by which Israel can handle more aggressively stage two of the of Hamas of the war against Hamas, because they can connect it to the imminent threat, the nuclear threat, the many weapons that remain in the hands of Iran. And Iran is, let's face it, it's a proxy power. It's a power based on proxies. So if they connect it that way, they can convince President Trump that Hamas must be isolated and eliminated according to the original Trump plan if it's connected to another attack on the Islamic Republic's nuclear and ballistic missile program that threatens Europe, threatens the United States, and threatens Israel equally.
Then, since we're talking about Iran, are you paying attention to what's happening in the West Bank? Did you see the
Iranian cells.
Iranian cells, number one? And 2 days ago, the IDF announced that they seized a large shipment of weapons, including rockets and explosive devices from Iran to Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas cells in the West Bank. In the last 2 months, the IDF or the Israeli security forces managed to seize rockets in the Ramallah area. There were even attempts by Palestinian cells to launch rockets towards Muda'in or Bitar Elite in that area. We are seeing Iranian affiliated cells in the West Bank raising their heads. Iran, in the aftermath of the war in Gaza, will try to shift the battle to the West Bank. And this is something very important. I'm even hearing this from Palestinian authority people who are looking at what's happening on the ground, and they see the emergence of all, or the re-emergence, I would say, of all these groups, and they see Iran trying to instigate some kind of an explosion or a confrontation or some kind of or launch terrorist attacks against Israel from the West Bank. This is something we need to pay attention to.
We sure do, and in fact, Khalid, it's a good way to put a cap on our program here, is to say, when we asked in the beginning of the program, what will happen in stage 2 and 3, what is already happening is happening in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, with Iran and its proxies, and that it may well be where stage 2 is going to focus on, with regard also to Gaza and the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, both under Iranian attack, and that will help shape the future of this ongoing jihad by Iran, Hamas, and the counter assault by Israel for security and for the safety and prosperity of the entire Middle East. So thank you ever so much, Khalid Abu Talmeh, for this great session. I think it was enlightening, and we all be mindful of where we move forward in our Middle East, al-Shaq al-Asad lana.
Thank you.